Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy has just ended, but we're just getting started here on post-show recaps. And now here are the two guys who both hopefully can say more in this podcast than just "I am Groot." I'm Zach Brooks, and joined today by Tyler Smith.
All right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Tyler, you ready to talk a little Guardians of the Galaxy?
I'm as ready as I'll ever be.
Yeah, well, that's good, I guess. It was. I saw it yesterday. When did you see it? You saw it Thursday night?
I saw a midnight screening on Thursday.
Yeah, and I thought it was great. What did you think?
Well, let's see. I'll be honest. I My expectations were high. I probably really wanted to like it because I'm a big fan of the director. Uh, and so I guess I'll put it this way. I wanted and expected to love it, but I merely really liked it. So, if you want to call that a disappointment, I went in expecting an A, and I got all I got was a B plus. So, but I still highly recommend it.
Yeah, my expectations were super high for this movie. I
Yeah.
had every review I'd seen of it said it was amazing, and I thought it was really good. I don't know if it's the best movie I've seen all year, but it's right up there for me. Um,
Yeah,
you
and
said it's directed by James Gunn. What else has James Gunn did?
he wrote the script for the Dawn of the Dead remake 10 years ago, but then he wrote and directed Slither, which is a horror movie that I really enjoy, and he wrote and directed Super with Rainn Wilson that I also really enjoy. So he has kind of an off-kilter directing style and writing style, and he finds a way to get at the humor in almost any situation, which is why when I found out that he was directing this, I was very excited, and I was hoping that some of his flavor would come through, and I think it really did.
Oh yeah, and I mean, directing to get humor in any situation, that's clearly how he directed this movie. There was a lot of humor. I thought it was really funny. Um,
Absolutely.
and great music too. All the music choices were really good in this as well.
Oh, I certainly from the moment the trailer debuted, but now it's just I've had Hooked on a Feeling stuck in my head for seemingly months, and then it started to go away, and now it's for the last 2 days it's been there pretty consistently.
Yeah, I saw an awesome YouTube video where they actually took Star Wars and made a Star Wars trailer using Hooked on a Feeling, and it worked. I mean, it worked really well, and it was done a lot like Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, that is the film that this reminded me of the most was Star Wars. It had that sense of uh, it's less a sci-fi film than just pure fantasy, and it felt like a fun adventure, and so it reminded me of Star Wars because there's very much a Han Solo character. In fact, one could argue that there are two of them. Um, and there's a Chewbacca character, there's a Darth Vader type of character, so it reminded me a lot of that. So I'm not surprised people are making that comparison
Yeah,
one
I
way
feel
or
like
another.
this was heavily influenced by Star Wars, by Indiana Jones. I got a lot of kind of shades of both of those movies seen.
Absolutely.
Um, so if you're watching live with us, you can send in your comments. You can use the hashtag PS Recaps. You also can use the chat window or the YouTube comments if you're watching this video on YouTube. And if you're watching in the archives or listening in the archives, you can tweet at Post Show Recaps to let us know what you thought of the movie and what your favorite parts were, what questions you had, and what how this fits in the Marvel universe for you. So
I'm okay. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, do you want to jump into the kind of what happens in the movie, or did you have other just general thoughts about the?
Uh, you know what? Let's jump into it. I think I'll mention my response to things as we go.
Great. So the movie started off a lot different than what I was. I don't really know what I was expecting because I didn't know a lot about this movie, and I tried not to know too much about it. I've seen almost all of the Marvel movies, and I really like how they all tie together. And we talked about on our superhero podcast
Hmm.
how much we loved what they did with the Avengers and having the individual stories and then adding them all together for the Avengers. And I thought you can kind of see how that universe is continuing to expand out. And at least I could see ties to how they're gonna tie Guardians of the Galaxy in with the Avengers and some of these other movies that they're making in the future.
Yeah, I was surprised, and maybe, if I'm being honest, a little bit displeased in just how much. I mean, there is major Marvel Cinematic Universe information being revealed in this film, and I've really felt like, because of the nature of what this movie is, which is kind of the misfit cousin of the Avengers, I felt like it would only have a tenuous relationship to that. But I mean, there are major characters, not necessarily introduced, but actually explored. There are huge plot developments that are explored, which we'll get to later when we get into kind of the spoiler section. And I was surprised how blatantly they did it. And I think this was actually maybe my big, not even an objection, but it's the thing that kind of, I don't know, I wouldn't say it didn't sit right with me, but just somehow it just didn't gel for me. And that's anytime the film was on its own, anytime the film was dealing with the characters by themselves, dealing with the story by itself, I was always on board. It felt like a fun, original creation. But when they started bringing stuff from the other Marvel films into it, when it had larger storylines to incorporate, that's when it started feeling a bit more generic. But anytime it focused in, anytime it felt like just kind of a one-off type movie and not part of something larger, I really enjoyed it. But anytime it dealt with, I'm trying to be really non-specific here, anytime it dealt with any of this other stuff, that's when I wouldn't say it lost me. I was still very interested and very excited, but that's when some of the personality of the film started to fade away from me. But that's very much just me. I think the tone of this film was so specific that I wanted to hold on to it as long as I could.
Yeah, I see. I'm a little different than you. I actually really liked when they tie it in with some of the other larger Marvel Universe themes and where they're going with the stories. So why don't we get into the plot of the movie? So if you haven't seen Guardians of the Galaxy yet, pause this podcast, go run to your movie theater, watch it, and then hit unpause and listen to the rest of this recap, because we're going to definitely dive into what happened in the movie, and I would recommend seeing it versus hearing it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So we kick off the movie, kind of unlike how we've seen a lot of Marvel movies. I feel like we start in 1988, and Pete is in a hospital, and he's listening to his awesome Mix One, which I thought was great. I thought there's a lot of callbacks to like the 80s throughout the movie, and you can kind of see where that comes from, because Pete's time on Earth was during the 80s.
Yeah.
So. And we quickly learn that Pete's mom is dying, I think, of cancer,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very close to death, and she actually dies during this scene. And right before she dies, she asks Peter to grab her hand and hold her hand, take her through it, and he gets scared and won't do it.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's for as fun-loving a film as this is, it's interesting that it starts with such a maudlin, sad scene. But I like that it does that, because it sets a very different type of tone, so that when the fun-loving quality of the story and of the character, when it comes into play just a few minutes later, you almost feel like the character is almost covering for something, that he's covering up a deeper pain that he's just not dealing with. And by showing us what that pain was immediately, I feel like it really added depth to that character. And it set up a theme throughout for all the characters that we'll get to a little bit later.
Yeah, and he kind of calls back to this moment a lot throughout the movie. I mean, there's obviously in the climax, he looks back on this moment where he won't grab his mom's hand, and that really is called back during the climax. And then just having the present that he just can't bring himself to open, that his mother gave him, and some of the other things. So his mom does give him a present that says, "Open this when I'm gone."
Yeah.
And then he is really upset and emotional and runs out of the hospital, and is picked up by a spaceship.
Yeah, which you don't immediately expect it to be that. You expect it to be this moment of like just you expect it to be like a backstory type moment for the character, and it is in more ways than one. Seems like a so insensitive of the aliens to pick him up at that moment of all
Yeah,
moments.
that his most emotional time. Uh, and it's like, where is anybody else in that hospital? Nobody grabs him when he tries to run out. It seems like that hospital is, the six people who we see in the hospital room, and that's it.
Yeah, it does seem strange to me that not to. Hey, in moments of grief, you never know what you're going to do, but it does seem strange that no one's dealing with the little kid whose mom just died. You know.
Yeah, and then I really would like to see, we jump ahead 26 years, and I'd like to have seen, well, what happens in the immediate, like, 10 minutes after he's taken by the spaceship. Are they
Yeah.
trying to find him? I mean, his mother just died, and then he completely disappears.
Yeah, it seems like at the very least I mean, by not showing us that, it's basically just putting us into his perspective completely. But it does seem like his grandfather, played by James Gunn favorite Greg Henry. It seems like we could have had a moment of him coming out of the room and looking and saying, Peter, where are you, and that sort of thing, and just uh, and the moment of sort of double loss on his face that he just lost his daughter and his grandson in some way. So, yeah, it does seem like I'd be interested in seeing some earthly consequences to the disappearance of the kid.
Yeah.
But I kind of like that we never deal with Earth ever. I mean, once
No.
he's gone, he's gone.
Yeah, no, that's the end of us seeing anything about Earth in this movie. So we jump ahead 26 years later, and the scene. I wrote down a lot of times when they would have the song that would play over the scene, which I thought was one of the best parts of the movie. Was they would have these like, not really montages, but they would have these scenes set to music.
Yeah,
It just made the scenes a lot more fun. And so we see adult Peter, he's played by Chris Pratt now, 26 years later, so he's what, maybe like 35 years old about.
yeah,
Um, and he's just kind of dancing around this cave on some planet, kicking little rat creatures,
yeah,
which right, like, very very Star Wars again.
yeah.
This scene especially, it was like
Using
very
one
Star
as a
Wars.
microphone.
Yeah, and he's projecting. I couldn't really tell what he was projecting. It was what, people eating dinner, or people drinking in a bar or something.
Yeah, I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. That was a little vague, but that was okay.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this must have been like maybe where the civilization used to be on this planet, so he was using it to figure out where the orb is.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. And
And
that's the thing. I really, I mean, that part really did remind you of like the opening scene of Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I really thought that this was just going to be an example of what he does for a living. I didn't know that in going to get the orb, like, all right, the story has kicked off
yeah,
right away.
yeah, no, we are. I mean, we're right into the action, and that was another great part of this movie is they didn't waste any time. Um,
It was
and the
very,
movie
very
was right
good.
around 2 hours, so it wasn't super long, but I didn't feel like there were any scenes in here that didn't need to be.
Yeah, I mean, it is a solid 2 hours, and an argument could be made that it could be shorter, but I can't think of what they would cut. And it moves along at such a good pace. I mean, you're certainly never bored.
No. So we don't really get a title sequence here. We get the actors and the cast names coming up onto screen
Hmm.
while he's dancing around this cave and getting to the orb. But then we don't. I feel like most Marvel movies we get a really intricate title sequence.
Yeah, and this one didn't have that, and I think it's yet another thing that separates this from the Marvel universe. I mean, it really makes it clear that these characters and this franchise is going to do its own thing. It's not going to allow itself to be dictated to by the other more respectable films.
Hmm. Yeah. So, uh, the interesting thing though is that this one I feel like they're really trying to tie to the other Marvel films. Um, it's weird that they would try to separate them. I guess it's just that they're so different. They're like what the black sheep cousins of the Avengers. Is that what they're called?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, I do like it. Here's the thing: is the plus and minus of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is that they do all have to conceivably exist in the same world or universe, if you will, and so there needs to be a consistency, a somewhat consistency of tone or visual style, because you need to believe that Tony Stark can exist in the same on the same plane as Thor or as Star-Lord or anything like that. So that can be a difficult thing, but within each franchise, the tone can be different. You know, certainly the tone from Captain America is very different than the tone of Thor, and this one really does have its own unique tone, while still, I think, maintaining the visual quality of those other films. Even though this one does seem more lush to me.
Yeah, I mean, this one just feels like the most fun. I think it's definitely the most fun Marvel movie I've seen.
Absolutely.
So, I liked when he referred to the guy as the Ninja Turtle. It just showed that like his scope of kind of pop culture references is right from the mid late 80s.
Yeah, though this is a picky film nerd complaint. As he is, I don't remember exactly when, but as he's describing the orb and how important it is. Now, if you're a film fan, you appreciate that what he's basically describing is a MacGuffin. He's describing it in terms of other movie MacGuffins, which I enjoy in theory. And he says it's like the Maltese Falcon, and I think he might even make a Pulp Fiction reference. And part of me thinks, well, Pulp Fiction came out 6 years after he left, and the Maltese Falcon.
I don't think he made a Pulp Fiction.
Did he not? There was another MacGuffin, but I might be wrong.
I think he said Ark of the Covenant.
Maybe that's what it is, which would make more sense. I'm sorry, I was talking about this with my friend, and we got confused about what the other one was. But nonetheless, he did reference the Maltese Falcon, which came out in 1941. I feel like at his age he might not be familiar with that reference, but movie fans are, and so I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I just took that to mean that he's, this kid's really into pop culture. He's clearly passed down culture from his mom. They shared music together, so I just assumed that she kind of shared that movie with him.
I guess so,
as one of the classics. I thought that was intentional. That was why he referenced that.
Yeah.
But we get a really great escape scene where we see him show off his like rocket boots and fly out, and that's he's able to escape these guys who want to get the orb from him.
And I promise I won't comment on literally every point of the film, but that's something that I really like about the character, is that there's a bumbling quality to him, but he's still good at the things that he does. He's had many, probably 20 years experience doing this thing, getting out of narrow scrapes and that sort of thing. And I thought that by making him so kind of inherently silly that he just wouldn't be good at anything, and then over the course of the film he gets good at what he does. But he's good immediately, and I like that. I like seeing characters that are good at what they do and you don't think that they're going to be. So, and I like that immediately you see that he may not be perfect at everything, but not unlike a Jack Sparrow from the Pirates of the Caribbean series. He's eccentric, he kind of has his own thing going, but he is also pretty good at what he does do. He's good at his job, and I like that.
Yeah. No, definitely we can see his expertise of being a thief and getting these treasures.
Yeah.
And those guys worked with, who we find out later is our main, one of our main villains. We kind of have three villains in this movie, but they work with Ronan, and he is also with, we find out, the daughters of Thanos. So we're immediately getting kind of a Thanos reference early in this movie, and people who have seen the first Avengers movie will know Thanos showed up after the credits, and is kind of teased as an upcoming villain that's going to be a part of the Avengers series, and I wasn't expecting to see Thanos in this movie.
Boy, I sure wasn't either. I mean, it really surprised me how blatant they were with it, and just really going for it. And when you think about it, I mean, aside from the Avengers tease of the character of Thanos, like the next Avengers movie comes out a year from now, and Ultron is the villain. So how far in advance are they thinking? I know that they have it planned out quite a ways, but we're seeing Thanos here, but we might not see him again for like 3 or 4 years, which is crazy to me.
Yeah,
Um,
and Josh Brolin is playing Thanos, and was it Josh Brolin in this movie who was playing him?
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah. Um, and so that was really great to see them kind of moving ahead with that. And from what I understand, yeah, Thanos isn't going to be the villain in Avengers 2, but they've already kind of plotted out, up until like 2019 with additional Guardians of the Galaxy movies and Avengers movies. So it sounds like Thanos will be, around for a while, and we'll be seeing him, bits and pieces of him.
Yeah, and I do like that. I mean, we're dealing with on a galactic scale in this film. So when characters reference Thanos, the Mad Titan, everybody just knows who he is, and I kind of like that. That it just they don't take the time to sit down and explain to the viewers who he is. They just throw us in to the deep end and just assume that if we don't know who he is, we'll figure it out. At the very least, we know that he's a pretty big badass.
Yeah, definitely. And so then we're on. This is a tough movie to recap because there's so many like strange planet and character names.
Yeah,
So I'm trying to pronounce them all correctly. So we're on Xander. Is that's the correct pronunciation of that
I
planet?
believe so. Yes.
Yeah. So and that reminded me a lot of like a futuristic Earth. That was the closest to Earth we got from anywhere, and
Yeah.
I'm sure that was intentional to kind of tie that. And that's why Peter wants to save Xander, and he kind of he feels a connection there.
Yeah, there were times I had to remind myself that it was not Earth, that it was not a futuristic Earth. And I think that's on me for just, but the Xandarians, I think is what they're called. They look like us, they talk like us. Everybody speaks English, conveniently
Yeah,
enough.
yeah,
So, except
exactly.
even Groot, he's got one line,
Yeah,
but thankfully it's in English.
yeah. So and this is where we meet some of the other members of the Guardians of the Galaxy team. We meet Rocket and Groot, and they're obviously not a team just yet, but they. So we have this big kind of chase scene with Rocket and Groot chasing Peter, who's also being chased by Gamora,
Yeah.
and they kind of all want different things. Gamora wants the orb. Rocket and Groot want Peter
Yeah.
to get the bounty, and we get a really cool fight scene and chase scene between all of them.
Yeah, it really, not unlike the Avengers, which really was able to juggle a lot of characters in one scene, and we never feel like it's favoring one character or another. I feel like this film really did the ensemble thing well, so that we always knew where everybody was, what their motivation was, how they related to each other. I really appreciated that.
Yeah, it was kind of marketed to really, and it is really Peter's movie. It's Peter's story, but
Yeah.
I feel like especially Rocket plays such a huge role, which is amazing because it's I don't know how when they film this, but Rocket's not actually there. This is just a CGI raccoon.
Yeah, they did have a little bit of. I don't know if it was motion capture, but I know that they had a guy stand in for him. It was actually the character. Okay, so Michael Rooker's character, his sort of right-hand man, that is Sean Gunn, brother, I believe, of director James Gunn, and an actor who's been in a number of things. And so he played the character that he played on screen, but he was also the stand-in for Rocket on the set. And
Oh, I see.
so
Okay. Well, that
so there
makes it
was.
probably a little less awkward to film that.
I think so, and I think it gave the animators like an actual performance to kind of base some things off of. And so yeah, let me ask you this, because this was actually a concern for me. Going into the film, I knew that I was going to see an anthropomorphic tree and a talking raccoon. Now, I was a little bit concerned, and I thought, is this going to be so instinctively silly that it's going to take me a while to get it on board with those characters? Was that a concern for you at all, or were you just more willing to just kind of go where it was going to take you?
When I first saw the trailer for it, I thought it looked kind of ridiculous, but
Hmm.
I feel like I had seen previews for it enough that I was just kind of I had already bought into that this is going to be a world where there's a tree that talks
Yeah,
and has one line. So I don't
yeah,
know.
and they
It worked for me. I thought it was better than I was expecting for sure.
yeah, and despite my reservations, there was literally never a moment where I doubted it, where I thought it was silly. I just accepted the reality and moved right along, because that's what the movie does.
Yeah,
It sort of says, if you have a problem with this, you'll have to get used to it. but you probably won't because the characters themselves don't. I mean, people sort of make fun of Rocket a little bit, but even he, later on in the film, is allowed a moment of real depth where he, while drunk and pointing a gun at everybody, he is explaining what it is to be what he is, and it almost seems to be addressing any possible audience objection to a character as inherently silly as the talking, scheming raccoon. Um, so yeah, when you said it's definitely Peter's movie, but we got a real sense of who Rocket was. I agree with you completely. He is a very strong character.
And I'm sure one of the main aspects of Groot is that he can only say "I am Groot."
Mm-hmm.
Very much like Hodor, he has one line that he can say, and somehow Rocket can understand what he means. And I was just surprised that Vin Diesel, they said Vin Diesel plays Groot. Well, I mean, he really just did one line. Like, I was surprised that Vin Diesel would take on that role. He didn't really do much.
He does. I'll say this: he does invest each line with the emotion that Groot is feeling, so that you always kind of know what he is trying to convey. So that in those instances where Rocket is responding to him directly, as though he had said a full paragraph worth of words, we're able to ascertain who Groot is, what he's feeling, what he's reacting to, and what his motivation is. And that is why you needed an actor, especially an actor like Vin Diesel, who's used to playing kind of monosyllabic types of characters. You needed an actor in there to really invest. You've only got 3 words, and he's going to say them anytime he's got something to say, but he's going to mean something something different every time. And so that's why you needed a really experienced actor. I think Vin Diesel is actually a pretty good actor when given the opportunity. And so I thought he did a very good job. And again, I don't know how much motion capture was involved, so I don't know how much of his physicality he invested in the character.
Yeah, it was definitely a fun character. I just was surprised that he would take on something with kind of limited.
Yeah,
I guess there's more to it than just the lines that he's delivering, but
yeah.
Much like Groot is much like a Hodor or a Chewbacca character, where we don't hear them saying much, but they're communicating.
Yeah, and maybe he took it for the challenge, because it is a challenge.
Yeah. And so they're all arrested. I'm assuming they're just arrested for fighting in public. Is that kind of?
I would assume so. Also, I believe the character. I think Peter Quill is also wanted on a number of crimes. So yeah, but also I just assume causing a ruckus. Why did I say that? Yeah, being violent in public is a better way of saying causing a ruckus. Good God, what is wrong with me?
So we'll jump ahead a little bit. They're taken to the Kiln, which I thought was a really cool name for where the prison is.
Yeah.
And they're discussing how Gamora wants to sell the orb. She wasn't actually going to take it back to Ronan. She was going to sell it to somebody else who she won't describe who.
Yeah.
And we also meet the 4th and final member of this team, which is Drax the Destroyer. And Drax was probably my favorite part of this movie.
You know what? I'm right there with you. As much as I love Peter, as much as I love Rocket, Drax, played wonderfully by Dave, is it Batista? Is that how you say it?
Yeah, it's former WWE wrestler Dave Batista.
Yeah, I knew very little about him as an actor. I think I knew that he had done some MMA, but I do know that this was a part he really campaigned for and really worked hard for. And yeah, Drax turned out to be just a fascinating character because he's very literal. He doesn't. I mean,
he's completely literal. I think that's my favorite part about him, is that he has no, he has no sense of humor. He can only just be literal.
And there's just somebody who is literal, but also has something of an ego and a high opinion of himself, but is also very threatening. you know, there you get wonderful lines like when somebody mentions, it's like, oh, I think that went over his head, and he just responds with, nothing goes over my head. My instincts are too keen. I would catch it, and just like not, just never. And you realize how much fun it must be to write a character like that, because think of how many expressions you and I, in our everyday life, how many things we just say, how many things we just throw out there. For example, throw out there.
Yeah,
You know, that's not even a
exactly.
real expression, but I'm just saying it. And how, like, really it really gives you the opportunity to examine the language and just how often we say things in place of other things.
Yeah.
And so his character allows that, and he's also, yeah, and just the humor that comes from his humorlessness is funny, and he's an imposing looking guy, and he has his own backstory that is quite tragic, and but again, like, in every character has their own tragic story. That's one of the things that I really like about it, is that the film is very much about kind of this makeshift family, and each one of them. I mean, later on in the film, Peter refers to them as losers, but not necessarily in the way that we would define losers. He says we're losers because we've all lost something or someone, and that void, that emptiness in each of the characters, that is kind of what has defined them a little bit. But he is looking for an opportunity, as I think they all are, whether they know it or not. They're looking for an opportunity to fill that void with other relationships and with people they care about, and they find that in each other. They see other people who have been hurt in some way, and use that as a point of connection. And so, and the character of Drax, he is so consumed with what he has lost that he makes very bad decisions, and it winds up endangering people that he is starting to care about, which is why later on in the film, when Rocket, he gets angry at him, and he goes, yeah, I'm sorry you lost someone, that sucks, but now you're actually putting the people you have now in the present, you're putting them in danger. And it's a really nice recurring theme throughout the film, this idea of loss, which you don't expect in a movie as inherently funny as this, which is,
Right. Yeah,
again,
exactly.
that juggling act.
They did a really good job maintaining that tone. And one of my favorite parts is right when we meet Drax, right in this first scene, when Peter kind of motions the, like, he puts his finger on his throat, and Drax says,
Yeah.
why would I put my finger on his throat? And my first thought was, oh, this is going to be like the stupid character. But then we
Yeah.
find out he's not the stupid character. He's just very literal about everything, and it was unlike any character I've kind of seen in one of these movies before. So I thought it was
Yeah.
great. I think that it's going to lead to a lot of potentially really cool scenes in the future in other Guardians of the Galaxy movies. So.
Yeah, well, and also it's conceivable that these characters will eventually interact with other parts of the Marvel universe. So, can you imagine Drax talking to Tony Stark?
Well, yeah, and my first thought was Drax talking to Captain America, because they're both they're so kind of straight edge guys. It would just be,
and
it could be really interesting.
And they're both in their own way a little bit out of touch with what the rest of the world is talking about.
Yeah. So moving along, we're still in the prison, and we get the team starting to come together to form their escape plan.
Mm-hmm.
And Rocket has this whole escape plan that includes taking that guy's leg, which Peter goes to recover the leg.
Yeah.
Turned out for no reason. And then he's also talking for a really long time about this whole plan and how they're going to remove the batteries so they can get out of there, and they can, I think it's turn off the shields. And as he's describing this intricate plan, we just see Groot in the background just reach up, take out the battery, and really kickstart this whole prison escape scene.
Yeah.
I don't remember what song. I think there was a good song playing during this scene once again, but I don't remember which song it was.
Yeah, the whole soundtrack is great, and I really wish that I had made notes of that, because I mean, that there's a lot of thought that went into each one, and sometimes it was a song picked to sort of enhance the emotional tone of that particular scene or sequence, but in other times it was meant to sort of run counter to it and be counterintuitive. And so, yeah, I wish I had written that down, because you know that James Gunn picked each song very specifically.
Yeah, they definitely worked in the scenes where they were
Mhm.
put. And I know "Hooked on a Feeling" was played, I think, when they're arriving at the prison, but I don't remember what was playing when they're leaving the prison.
Yeah, yeah, I wish I remembered.
And I wish I had, if I had read the comics, I wonder if a lot of these '80s references are in the comics as well, or if maybe these comics were written in the '80s and that's why they kind of went with this theme.
From what I hear, this version of the team Guardians of the Galaxy, because that title has been around since the '60s, but from what I hear, this iteration of them is pretty recent, like maybe not even in the last 10 years, because I knew very little about these characters. I knew a little bit about Drax because he shows up in comic books a while ago. Um, and when I read comic books in probably the early 90s and maybe into the mid 90s a little bit, and then I stopped. So that should say something about how recent these characters are, is that I was unfamiliar with mostly all of them.
Hmm.
So yeah, and it surprises me that they chose to make this movie with characters that are hardly, um, well established. They feel like something in music terms. They feel like a deep cut.
Oh,
Um,
definitely, and it just shows the kind of the faith they have in this being a great story and a great cast and great director that carry it. And it's I think it's going to be one of their highest grossing movies. I think a lot of
yeah,
people are going to see it this weekend.
yeah. I was actually a little worried because they're not, Star-Lord is not Iron Man. People don't know who he is. He's not Captain America, so they're not immediately. The audience doesn't have an immediate association with them. Um, so I could have seen the film being kind of a misfire financially, but it looks like it's going to take the weekend, and I think audiences are responding very well to it. And
Yeah.
so they had already announced that there was going to be another one, regardless of how this one did. Though I'm sure if it was a total failure, they might have rethought it. But it looks like there's going to be another one in like 3 years.
Yeah. And then, they've even talked about an Avengers Guardians of the Galaxy crossover later in the future. So
Yeah, which
there's
sounds
a lot.
fantastic.
There's a lot of, I think that's kind of injected another spark into this Marvel universe. And
I think so because I think it was starting to become very familiar. Once Phase 2 was basically done, even though I liked those films, I liked Captain America: The Winter Soldier, I liked Iron Man 3, the Thor movies I've only liked so much. Um, but yeah, it felt like we needed just not only different characters but just a different tone, and this film definitely injects that different tone.
yeah, and you spoke about Thor 2, so why don't we jump into kind of where the characters go next, which is that they take the ship to a mining town to sell the orb to the Collector, and of course the Collector, if you've seen Thor 2, shows up in the post-credit scenes uh, at the end of Thor 2, and he gets the I don't remember what it was called, but the weapon from Thor 2, which is also one of these important Infinity Stones.
Yeah, that scene from Thor 2 is, even though it's a post-credit scene, uh, and kind of outside the initial story, that scene is my favorite scene of Thor 2, just because I'm a big fan of Benicio del Toro. I have been ever since I think I first saw him in The Usual Suspects, and then Fear and Loathing, and then Traffic, 21 Grams. Like he's always such an interesting actor. Um, and I love what he's been doing with the Collector. I'll be honest, I would have liked to see more of him in this film. That character, he's very intriguing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming that they're showing him because we're gonna, again, they're building up another character that we're gonna see in future movies. But yeah, I thought we were gonna get more of him in this movie.
Yeah, I
And
was
we
looking
don't
forward to
really see
that.
much of him.
Yeah.
Um, but so uh, this is the scene where the Collector kind of explains the Infinity Stones, and we find out that the orb is one of these Infinity Stones, and I think there's 6 Infinity Stones.
Yeah.
And so we've seen 3 of them so far. So the Tesseract from the Avengers movie, the
Hmm.
weapon from Thor 2 is another Infinity Stone, and
Yeah.
then and then this orb is the third one. So we've seen 3 out of 6. So we're kind of getting the pieces along the way.
Yeah, and this is where, I mean, this scene is crucial not merely to this film. It's only actually mildly important to this film, but when he explains there's 6 of them. If you have all 6, you are basically in charge in this universe. And this scene is so important because it's basically setting up exposition not just for this film, but for the next 5 films, for the next next 10
I don't know
years.
when this is going to come to a head, but we've seen 3. We've got, I think the next Marvel movie coming out is actually the Avengers. So I'm sure we'll see one in the Avengers, and
yeah,
I would assume we're well on our way to seeing Thanos acquiring these Infinity Stones.
Yeah, and that's, I mentioned that I read comic books in the early '90s, and I don't know. Are you a comic book reader? Have you ever been?
A little bit. I've more like followed, growing up. I like followed cartoons of it and video games, but not as much the actual books.
Yeah, I count myself very fortunate to have actually been reading comic books when the Infinity War happened. And so, a lot of this stuff meant something to me, and watching it now, and I was very excited because it's not every day that I actually recognize something in these movies, because I stopped reading comics so long ago. But like in the new X-Men movie, the post-credit sequence, the minute I saw a pyramid, I remember thinking like, oh, I know what that means. Even though I think the franchise should be over, I'm excited again. And so the thing that gets me though is that like, and by the way, viewers, listeners, whatever, if you are comic book fans, go back and look into the Infinity Gauntlet, because it's very interesting and it's rough. You get various superheroes going after Thanos, and they all basically, spoilers, they all basically die in their own horrible way, which speaks to the power of the character and the power of the Infinity Gems. And that's the thing that gets me, is I just feel like he's going to be so powerful when they get that. I mean, what's Hawkeye going to do?
It's clearly that they're trying to build this up. That we've seen Thanos very briefly in the Avengers. We saw him a little bit more expanded in this movie. I would imagine going forward we're going to keep seeing more and more of him.
Yeah.
And just building him up as this ultimate bad guy. And I would, I don't really know what the plans are for the Avengers series after this, but maybe they're going to go to Avengers 3, and that will be the big Infinity Gauntlet storyline, and then that will be maybe the end of the Avengers, and they're going to start some new Marvel storylines. I'm not sure.
I feel like it would have to be that, because when you get that big, there's nowhere else you can go. Frankly, I mean, as much as I'm looking forward to Age of Ultron, part of me feels like it was, as far as threat, it felt like a step backwards. I mean, we were dealing with a cosmic war with aliens invading this world, and now we're going to a bunch of robots. It seems. And then of course when you go to the individual movies, where you realize, oh wow, Captain America was able to take on all these aliens, but this guy with a metal arm seems to be giving him trouble. Like, it just seems counterintuitive.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of like how they scale it back. They kind of throttle it for these big movies, and then they scale it and make it very very focused on just what's going on in this character's story, and that they're able to do that. And I feel like it's fairly smooth. I mean, I know if people say, oh, Captain America is fighting this guy, why doesn't he just call the Hulk?
Yeah, there is. Yeah, I will say this, that it's one of those things where it doesn't really bother me when they scale it back. I recognize that's a thing they have to do, and they usually do it so effectively that it doesn't bother me. But I will say that once the Avengers as a team have been established, it is hard to believe that they wouldn't bring in these other guys, especially like in Iron Man 3, a movie that I actually liked quite a bit. The Mandarin is a terrorist, and he is attacking the United States. Given that context, it does seem like Captain America, who is an agent of his own government, you feel like he would be getting involved. But again, that's I understand why they can't do that, and so I'm fine with it. But
yeah.
But anyway, I'm sorry. I keep distracting us. We can move
Oh
on.
yeah, I think we're kind of we've hit our action at this point in the
Yeah.
movie. Well, we hit our action from the beginning, but we've really kind of we're almost at our climax of the movie. The team is assembled. They have kind of Groot versus Drax as a fight, and then we get the scene with Rocket that you referenced where he's drunk and upset about the way he's always treated, and we also find out some other backstory. Gamora isn't really Thanos' daughter.
Yeah.
He um, he stole her from her parents, and we learn a little bit more about Peter's relationship with his mother as well.
And this actually reminds me. I'm gonna stop us once again. I apologize. Maybe my least favorite part of the film. Zoe Saldana does her best. She is a good actress. I feel like the character of Gamora, she's given a lot of backstory, and she's given motivation, and good for her. But I don't know her. I don't know who she is. I don't know what is her personality. You and I could sit here, we could talk about who Peter is, who Drax is, Groot, Rocket. We get a sense of who they are as far as how they relate to other people. I don't know who Gamora is. I know what drives her, and I know her background, but I don't know. She feels like a stranger to me in a film where we're getting to know people, and some of that is a character thing that she doesn't open up easily. But I feel like I don't know. It felt like her character was a little bit underwritten, and frankly, when it's the only real female character, to have her feel a little underwritten, I don't know. It's something to be concerned about, I think. And I don't put that on the actress. I think it's a problem with the writing.
Yeah, well, and I've actually seen articles after this movie has come out saying, could Marvel have like a female lead superhero movie? And I think they probably point to this as maybe not, because it's just she was so underutilized in this.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, I mean, the character could have been. I mean, okay, so we talked about Star Wars, and this reminding us of Star Wars a little bit. I always had a really strong sense of who Princess Leia was. I knew where she came from, I knew what her motivation was, but I also knew who she was. I knew how she acted, how she responded to things. When you think of like your friends and also some of your favorite movie characters, let's look at it like that. And you're asked to describe them, you might talk about where they come from, but you'll probably talk about their personality. And I feel like there's enough there with the Gamora character to make her like a Princess Leia, make her desperately wanting to connect to other people, but she won't allow herself to. And I see that potential in the character, but I feel like it's unrealized potential. And so yeah, in a film where they really could have done something with a female character and had her be every bit the equal of Peter Quill, and she's equal as far as abilities, but as far as dynamic personality, she's the least of the five, and that speaks to she's the least of the five, and I'm incorporating a character who only speaks 3 words over and over again. Like that should tell you something.
But she
So
does. I
it
mean,
is.
she definitely can kick ass, and she's in the scenes where she has to fight people, I think she's awesome.
Yeah,
And we kind of see that as we get as we keep going into this plot, where she fights her sister, which Nebula I think is her sister's name.
yeah. Which, by the way, I love the design of Nebula. I think she looks great.
Yeah.
But yeah, it felt like, and that's the thing is she's fighting her own sister, and there's a really good line in there where her sister talks about something about like of all of our siblings or whatever, I hated you the least, which is it's almost kind of funny, but it's a really good a desire to connect for both of them, and I feel like there could have been more significance to that fight, but there
Well, we
isn't that
also had
much.
Thanos reference that Gamora is his favorite daughter.
Yeah, and that's neat. And again, but that's more stuff about the character as opposed to getting to know her specifically. And I remember um, back at when I was at WonderCon, we saw uh, scenes from the movie Lucy with Scarlett Johansson, which I actually have since seen, and it's fine. It was better than I thought it was going to be, but like you mentioned that she does kick ass, and indeed she does. She's very exciting to watch on screen, but like a female character who is strong physically is not the same as a strong female character. I mean, when you think of in action movies and stuff like that, when you think of a strong female character, the first person I always think of is Ripley from the Alien series, but then also like Katniss from Hunger Games. If you were to ask me to describe who is Katniss, I would probably give you her background, but I could talk about how she is, she is scared of connecting to other people because in this world you never know when somebody's going to be taken away. She's deeply cynical, and she is willing to do whatever it is she has to do. I'm describing personality traits. And as far as Gamora, I really don't have much to describe, and that is, I feel like that's a missed opportunity, especially when you have an actress like Zoe Saldana, who I think can invest a lot in every character she plays. So I think she was game to do whatever they wanted to do, and they didn't do that much. So I think that's a bummer, and that's not a thing that I tend to think about very much. But when you realize that you've got an ensemble of 5. And each one needs to be as developed as possible, and then you realize the only female is the one that is not developed. It does bum me out a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would think that it's not that big of a differential. I don't know if we see as much about Drax the Destroyer, for example, or about I don't really know anything about Groot except that he's with Rocket. So
right. But we do. Sorry, not to belabor the point because I know we do have to move on. But that's the thing is, I mean, you and I talked about Drax. He takes everything literal, so we think he's dumb, but he's actually not. There's a grieving quality to him. There's a tragic quality to him, and he wants to connect with people. He's very self-destructive. We're describing personality, and with Groot, he's eager to please. He's like a puppy dog. He's like a kid. We're describing aspects of his personality. Aside from her own type of humorlessness, I feel like I don't have much to say about Gamora. Mm-hmm. And so, as opposed to, like I said, a Princess Leia type character who I have a very strong feeling about as far as her personality. But anyway, I'm sorry. That is maybe my biggest complaint with the film. And that doesn't even really keep me from enjoying it, and it doesn't keep me from enjoying the interaction of the 5.
Yeah, and we definitely start seeing this kind of budding romance between Peter and Gamora, and mm-hmm. When we're back in the collector's room and his servant grabs the orb and explodes the entire warehouse, for lack of a better term. We see there's kind of all of our characters start coming together again, and we see is it Yondu? Is that the blue guy?
Yeah, Yondu, Michael Rooker's character.
Yeah, so we see Yondu arriving, and we have Peter saving Gamora. He puts on I think the mask and the rocket boots is really cool when he's able to utilize that. So he saves her and gives himself up to Yondu. But Ronan is able to get the orb, and Groot, Drax, and Rocket decide that they're going to go after the orb to go after him.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. What did you think of the character of Ronan?
I thought he was very Darth Vader. He reminded me a lot of Darth Vader, and especially the scene where he's talking to Thanos over the hologram. It reminded me so much of the Emperor versus Emperor and Darth Vader working together. And I think that you talked about kind of your complaint. My biggest complaint is so many times I felt like I was watching Star Wars watching this movie, which isn't a bad thing, but it just, after watching this movie, I walked out of it and said, okay, well, I kind of feel like I understand what a Disney version of Star Wars is going to look like that's coming out next year. And
it is kind of interesting, yeah. And it's one of those things, like, you could do a lot worse than watching Star Wars, but we already have Star Wars. We don't need another one.
And like there were things like that the ship is called Milano, which is so close to Millennium Falcon, I felt like, and there's the Emperor Darth Vader scene, and it a part of me was like, okay, well, this is they're calling back to Star Wars or calling back to Indiana Jones, and then there's kind of a fine line between paying homage and just kind of taking things, and I felt like there was it was almost a little too much Star Wars.
Yeah, and I felt like the character of Ronan. I think Lee Pace does a good job and really invests that character with some genuine hatred. So like there are lines when he's talking to Drax and talking about killing Drax's family that I feel like, wow, this guy's a really evil guy. And I like the scene where he is when he rebels against Thanos, which of course we the audience are like, you can't do that. You're gonna get yourself killed, man.
I thought
But
that
the
was great. I love that he did that, and then he says, I'm going to go blow up Xander, and then I'm going after Thanos. I thought was really
Yeah, and so I feel like that helps develop the Ronin character a little bit. But as far as who he is, yeah, I mean, visually he does have a Darth Vader and Emperor quality to him. But when you think about it, he's not that different than the villain in Thor 2. I mean, they're pretty interchangeable. And when you
yeah.
compare them to somebody like Loki or the Red Skull, they just they wind up anytime we're dealing with like a cosmic villain that isn't Thanos, and even then we don't have much of a sense of who Thanos is yet. But anytime we're dealing with a cosmic villain, they seem pretty underdeveloped. The power of the character still comes through, and he still seems like a genuine threat. But but yeah, I feel like he didn't have much personality either. And again, I don't put that on Lee Pace. I think he did what he could.
Yeah, I think for me, when I see these Marvel movies, I definitely enjoy something that's a little bit more grounded into reality than this
Yeah.
is. So when the parts of the Thor movies that I like are the parts where they're on Earth, not the parts where they're on some planet battling
Hmm.
aliens. So um, I don't know, just for Marvel movies, it works better for me if it's a little bit more grounded to Earth, and that's why the Xander scenes work really well for me,
Yeah.
and I really like those.
Yeah.
So, uh, so we get a little bit of character interaction, kind of setting up our final battle. Um, Yandu is gonna kill Peter, but Peter convinces him instead that they should go after the Infinity Stone together and that they can make all this money. And then we get a great scene with Cherry Bomb as the backdrop song, and where they're when
Oh
they're getting
yes.
ready and they're getting ready to team up and go after the Infinity Stone and go after Ronan. Um,
Hmm.
and this all kind of comes to a head above Xander.
Yeah, and I do one thing that I do like. I don't know why. There's just, and I think everybody has this in their own way, where there are just certain things that a movie does, or a TV show, or a book, or whatever. Just certain things that like push a button inside you, and you just think, I liked that. I really enjoyed that. And I always like the idea of people putting aside differences, even big differences, in order to achieve a single goal. So it's not merely that Yondu and the other Ravagers put aside their issues with Peter to work together. Um, it's not merely that. Uh, it's that the what is it? The Nova Corps? Is that what it's called?
Nova Prime.
Yeah, I think. Well, that's Glenn Close's character.
Yeah,
But yeah, the Nova people, the space cops, basically, um, they they're working together with guys that they know to be criminals, all to neutralize this much larger threat. I don't know
yeah.
why, but I really respond to that kind of thing.
I thought that was really great, and I really liked all of the Nova ships. I guess they're called the Nova ships. They all line up. And you're like, oh, they're gonna fight, and then they all combine to create this awesome force field shield thing,
Yeah,
which really I felt like was unlike anything I'd seen before. So
exactly. Anytime you see something that you haven't seen before, especially when you think you know what you're going to get, boy, it makes all the difference. And their force field that also kind of felt like a net.
yeah,
I loved it. I really, it's really moments like that where just little bits of originality that sets this film apart.
yeah. Oh, definitely. I mean, this originality is the key to this movie. Besides all the stuff that I talked about with Star Wars, but with the scenes with the music, I thought were unlike anything I'd seen in this type of movie. And then like this net scene was really good. And so then we get our big kind of space battle, which again felt like Star Wars, but it was fun. It was easy to understand what was going on.
Yeah.
And and I might be skipping something, so let me know if I am. But we see the ship starts to crash towards towards the ground, and Groot sacrifices himself by creating a really big, I guess, like tree shield around
Yeah.
all of the characters. Um, and that was a pretty neat way to get around them crashing onto Xander.
And
So,
I mean, there's that moment when he says, "We are Groot," which that's the
oh
thing.
yeah,
From a story standpoint, I can see the manipulation. I can see just like, oh, really? This is when he learns new words. But emotionally, it worked, and it speaks to that larger theme of people coming together and becoming one family unit. So yeah, that part was very effective for me.
yeah,
Um,
and at that point we think that Groot has been killed off. I mean, did you buy that they had actually killed off Groot and he was no longer going to be in the series?
I didn't think he was no longer going to be in the series. I figured, well, this weird tree monster. Sorry to call him a monster, but you know what I mean. It's like they're probably not. You know, he can probably come. He can come back any number of ways, but I figured he was gone for the duration of for the rest of this film. I thought.
Yeah. And one of the cool parts actually that happens right before that is we see Drax shoot Ronan with the rocket launcher, and that rocket launcher we see a couple times in this movie. And
Yeah.
I don't know why that weapon I thought was really well designed and really awesome.
Yeah, and I like one of the things that I like about the climax. I feel like as much as I enjoy the Marvel films, I feel like they almost always fumble the climax. Um, with the exception being like the Avengers, it's always so big and just I don't have a problem with CG, but I do have a problem when you start to lose the human element. Um, and this one, I was worried that they were going to. It's like, all right, here's a bunch of ships fighting. Now a ship is crashing. It's all spectacle and it loses the humanity. But then once the ship has crashed and Ronan emerges, and then it's a face off. You know, then it's mano a mano. It's the team versus him. There's no more ships. There's no more lasers or anything like that. It's just trying to outwit him. In his, I appreciated that because it felt truer to the movie we were watching. That Peter will distract him in his own delightful way, and that they'll get the opportunity to take him out. And as you mentioned, the whole moment where Peter's got the Infinity Gem, he's probably going to explode maybe, but by grabbing Gamora's hand, by grabbing Drax's hand and Rocket, it's almost as though they as a unit can share the energy, and thus it won't overcome any one of them because they're together, which speaks to the overall theme of the film. And it was really emotionally impactful to me. I really liked that moment. And so it was everything a climax should be, which is not merely viscerally exciting, but emotionally satisfying. And so I really liked it. I thought they did a great job with it.
Yeah, I really like that. I liked that it had the callback to the first scene, where who knows if that was just a callback or if we find out later that that Peter's father was not human. He was not from Earth, and I really liked how they called humans Terrans. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it took me a while to figure out what they were doing with that, but I got it.
Yeah. And that's why he was able to survive this is because he's half something else, which we don't know
Yeah.
what that something else is. Um, and they grab each other's hands and they really, in movies like this, and when there's teams in the Avengers or X-Men, it usually that last scene is them all teaming up to defeat this villain. So I thought
Yeah.
it was an interesting way. You talked about Peter dancing to distract him was unlike, it's not like Iron Man shooting rockets or your Captain
Yeah.
America, deflecting something off his shield. This is Peter using his charm to, it was like, and even Ronan's like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So I thought that was great.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, it speaks, I think, to the film that we're seeing is because, instinctively you want to see our lead, and while it is an ensemble film, Peter is our lead, and you want to see the lead defeat the villain. But in this case, all he does is serve as a delightful distraction while one of the other characters takes out the villain, and that's when you realize that we've gone from seeing a single lead film to a true team movie, where it doesn't matter which one of them ultimately triumphs because the triumph belongs to all of them.
Yeah.
So I like that a lot.
And so, kind of in the aftermath of all of this, Yandu wants the Infinity Stone, and of course, Peter gives him what turns out to be a fake. And that was, I mean, that wasn't a surprise to me. Was that?
Not at all.
Yeah, because we knew that they all had those protectors for the Infinity Stone, and so
Yeah.
yeah, that wasn't that wasn't anywhere out of left field. But even when Yandu finds out, he just kind of starts laughing, and he's like, "Oh, I guess I got a troll doll instead."
Yeah, and just
Got
and
me again.
yeah, it does seem to be kind of that got me again, and also almost an affectionate thing because he did sort of raise Peter, and so almost as if like, yes, this is a hassle, and yes, I might have to kill this guy, but I did, I raised him right. This is what
Yeah.
I would have done. And I do like that sequence, that montage, where it really does understand the aftermath of something like this. I mean, you see John C. Reilly's character going to see his family, who would have died if not for the work of the Guardians of the Galaxy. And it's a nice acknowledgement that yes, there are real people that could die in these attacks, and so stuff like that. To the song "Ain't No Mountain High Enough," which is a nice moment. So yeah, it's again, anytime the film, which is regularly, anytime the film embraces the human consequence of what we're watching, it sets itself apart not merely from other Marvel films, not to imply that they're inhuman, but also just other action movies. You tend not to shrink things down to a personal scale, but this one does on a regular basis. And one thing we didn't mention, by the way, speaking of the Yondu character, is how awesome his little whistle-controlled arrow is, and how we finally get to see hints of what it might do, and then when we finally see it in full effect, it's a super awesome scene. I was in the movie alone, which is a bummer because I wanted to high five somebody.
Yeah, no, that was a really awesome weapon. The weapons in this movie are pretty great, just all around. I thought they were really good.
They are. They some of them are comically large. Yeah, and like you mentioned, the cannon that they shoot at Ronan, they're all designed so specifically. I mean, it could have the world that was designed in Guardians of the Galaxy, it could have seemed so generic, but in true Star Wars fashion, they all, whether it be the aliens or the worlds that they go to or the weapons that they use, they all have a real lived-in exotic feel to them. Even, you mentioned the mining colony. Well, the mining colony happens to take place in the severed head of a galactic being. And years before, miners went into this severed head to mine organic matter like bone and brain. That's crazy, and it's so specific that I just love it. And
That's part I actually didn't even catch. So that's really neat.
Yeah, it's such a neat design, and yeah, that is what you get from a director like James Gunn. Is he will explore the world that he has created as much as he can, and he'll do it in a way that is human and clever. If you haven't, not just you, Zach, but viewers and listeners, if you haven't seen Slither, first off, it's a really grotesque horror film, so be ready for that. But if you also haven't seen Super, go and watch them because they're very distinct and they're very dynamic, and they'll pull you in one way or another.
Yeah, I had heard of Super, I hadn't heard of Slither, so I'll have to.
Oh my gosh!
Check those out.
Do you enjoy horror movies?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part.
All right, well, enjoy Slither, which manages to take like 8 different subgenres of horror and put them into one film. And boy, oh boy, I'm excited for you. Go and watch it, and then email me and let me know what you thought.
Oh man, all right, I will definitely get on that. So we're kind of at the end of our story, so there is one more scene I want to talk about. But if you do have any questions or comments and you're watching live, feel free to add those now. And Scott is monitoring the chat and the hashtag PS recaps, and we'll definitely answer any questions you guys have about the movie. But our last scene, had to sit around wait for the post-credit scene. Uh,
Yeah.
and this one was very different than most of the post-credit scenes we've seen, because usually those are going to hint at what the next movie is going to be about, what we're going to see for a villain, and instead we just see the collector sitting in his destroyed warehouse. He's being licked by his dog, and we hear somebody making fun of him, and the camera pans over, and who is it? It's Howard the Duck.
Boy, oh boy, it sure is. And here's the thing. Like you said, in the post-credit scenes, they tend to be, hey, here's what to expect in the next film. Somehow I get the feeling that's not the case with this, but I almost wish it was. Wouldn't it be neat if they decided to make a Howard the Duck film?
And so
Um,
I've never seen. I know there was the '80s version of Howard the Duck that came out. I think
yeah,
George Lucas made. I never saw that.
I did, and it is considered one of the biggest bombs, and it is financially. Artistically, it's. I'm not familiar with the comic books. Maybe the comic books are as weird as that film is, and weird doesn't bother me, but just weird and just a inconsistency of tone. Oh, and also we are dealing with an anthropomorphic duck, but hey, we had just spent 2 hours dealing with a raccoon, so maybe we're in a position to finally reimagine Howard the Duck.
I was gonna say I don't. I didn't feel if any movie is gonna have Howard the Duck show up, this is the one. If Howard the Duck shows up in the Avengers, it might seem a little off, but yeah, where we have the raccoon and we have a tree,
Exactly.
I think it totally fits.
Yeah, if this one showed up at the end of Captain America, everyone would be furious somehow.
Yeah.
Whereas here it just seemed like a delightful nod to, yeah, the Marvel universe is much bigger and more diverse than we thought.
Yeah. Um, and it was interesting. I would have liked to have seen something that hinted at Avengers 2, or yeah, Avengers 2, or
Yeah.
where Guardians of the Galaxy is going to go in the future. But at the end of the movie, we didn't point out we do see the characters are all on the Milano, ready to go off for some other adventure, and
Yeah.
trying to decide should they do something bad or something good. And we do see Groot is starting to grow
Yeah.
back. So Groot is still alive, and I don't know what will happen to the rest of the pieces of tree that are still on Xander. I don't know if there will be many Groots now, or those just don't do anything. But
That'd be kind of neat. Yeah, and I will say that idea of wishing that the last scene would incorporate more things or promises of what's to come. I feel like you got a lot of that in this movie, and I wasn't expecting it.
true.
More, you've got a lot more Thanos. You have an in-depth discussion. I mean, we're now speaking very overtly about the Infinity Gems. So that's clearly where we're going. And so it felt like there were a number of Easter eggs just in the movie. And little things of, okay, who is Peter's father going to turn out to be? That's something to be explored in another film. So
Yeah,
I
I
was
think
okay with it.
that's definitely a big question leading into the next one is kind of who's Peter's father, and how does he fit into this story? Because he can't just be some random guy. He's got to be somebody important.
Yeah, I'm very excited, not just for the next Guardians of the Galaxy, which James Gunn is going to make. He's attached to do it, so I'm excited for that. But I'm just, as always, and this is as it should be, I'm excited to just spend more time in this universe. I haven't loved every movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I don't think you're necessarily supposed to. I know that financially they would like you to, but I think you're supposed to, not unlike the comic books. You like the ones you like. And you could love Thor, I could love Iron Man, and that's okay. And when they come together for the Avengers, that's when you and I can come together as fans. And so, what Marvel is doing has never been done before in film, and it's really, you can be cynical about the financial calculation behind it, but it still does it pretty well. And while I am bummed out that Edgar Wright dropped out of Ant-Man for, I would assume, reasons of studio involvement and that sort of thing, which bothers me, by and large, I'm still pleased with what they're doing, and I really can't wait to see Age of Ultron.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So I don't know if Scott has any questions for us right now. I know he was monitoring that
Yeah, it looks like not. Just a little bit of chatter, but no real questions.
All right. Um, so I think that kind of covers it. If you had to pick what you would like to see them do next with this story, where would you like to see them go?
Oh boy, I have. And I guess maybe this is a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know. Maybe I'll get your take on it. Um, the uh, the nature of these characters in this story is that I can't even begin to predict what they could do next. It seems like the sky is the limit. I mean, they've got a whole galaxy to explore with different species and all that. And so the next thing, who knows what it could be. Now, that speaks to the malleability of the characters and the world. So the fact that I can't imagine what the next thing would be, does that speak well of the film or ill of the film? Because one could make the argument that that if they had made a really lived-in specific universe, you'd be able to have an idea of what comes next.
Do you think we're going to get them versus Howard the Duck? Maybe that was why they showed that at the end. Howard the Duck is the next villain.
That would be fine with me. I like when they think outside the box, and you do not get more outside the box than Howard the Duck.
Yeah, I think we might see somehow. I mean, we're definitely going to see some more into Peter's backstory,
Yeah.
and his heritage and his upbringing. So I think it wouldn't surprise me to see them spend a little bit of time on Earth, and I can just kind of imagine them having to disguise Groot and Rocket when they're on Earth, and that could lead to some pretty funny scenes. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like that's probably where they're going next, but who knows? We'll find out in a couple of years when the next one comes out, I guess.
Yeah, and also, frankly, I feel like if I knew the comic better, I'd have an idea of what they could do. But I don't know who the big Guardians of the Galaxy villains are.
Yeah,
So
no, I don't
yeah,
either, which is kind of nice. It's kind of nice having no idea, who they're gonna confront and who are what are their powers and things like that.
it is nice. It is nice being surprised because when you watch Iron Man, it's only a matter of time before the Mandarin shows up. When you watch Thor, well, actually, I don't know much about Thor villains, but when you watch Hulk, you know that okay, the Abomination, the leader, like you just know these things. Whereas by exploring lesser known characters, um, first off, it means that people who weren't familiar with them can actually go and explore them in the comics, but it also means that you genuinely don't know what's coming next, which is very exciting.
Yeah, and with summer blockbusters, there's the promotional tie-ins and the kids who buy the action figures and the T-shirts. Who do you think is going to be the biggest, I guess, winner out of this for the person like kids are really into and like that people are talking about the most? Do you think it's going to be Rocket Raccoon?
I think it'll be Rocket. Probably
Yeah.
Rocket and Groot. I feel like those characters are meant to be kind of the breakout characters. And from the point of view of like a toy collector, not that I collect toys, uh, I do collect toys, but they're a very specific kind of toy, and that is, for example, I collect Riddlers, and so I've got a whole bunch of them, and so it's the kid in me. But
So are you investing in the Rocket Raccoon diecast?
if I don't think so, but that's the thing. I know that if I were a kid and I saw this film, I would be so excited to get a Rocket Raccoon and a Groot because they're just the most dynamic looking characters. But I would probably enjoy a Drax. I'd probably, you know what? I'd collect all five.
Yeah, I feel like they got to be as a set. So.
Exactly.
Well, thanks for everybody for joining us today for the Guardians of the Galaxy post-show recap or post-movie recap. So you can follow Tyler. He's at More Lessons, and he's also. What's your other Twitter handle, Tyler?
I've only got the one Twitter handle, but you can find me at battleshippretension.com, which is for the website of my weekly podcast, Battleship Pretension, which is just about movies in general. The episode that goes up tomorrow is me recapping what I saw at Comic-Con this year, including I was able to watch the the premieres of The Flash and Gotham, and so I talk about that as well.
Great. And you can follow me at BrooksZA. And let us know what you thought of the movie. Let us know what you thought of the recap. You can use hashtag PS Recaps. You can also tweet at Post Show Recaps to let us know your thoughts and what next what's the next big summer blockbuster you're looking forward to seeing.
Well, let's see. This was I'll say this was the last film of the summer that I was really looking forward to. I'm interested in Sin City, A Dame to Kill For, and then for post movie recaps, it's looking like I will be seeing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which I would venture to say I am not looking forward to, but I'm open to being surprised if it turns out being better than I think it's going to be. Great. I don't want to have my mind made up beforehand, but yeah, I think I was excited for Godzilla, X-Men, Planet of the Apes, and Guardians of the Galaxy, and so with this one we've passed the last film that I was really looking forward to, and now all that's left are movies that I'm intrigued by and might wind up loving, but yeah. So the next one that I'm actually genuinely interested in is Sin City.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited for the Expendables movie. I'm not gonna lie. I didn't love the first one. I thought the second one was a lot of fun. I think that Expendables 3 is probably my next big one. But I still need to go back and see Planet of the Apes. So.
Oh boy, absolutely. And it is a film that I think you should see in the theater. It really explores that a lot. And hey, once you see it, you can always go back to the post movie recap I did with Jeremiah.
I have that saved. I've been meaning to see the movie so that I can go back and watch that movie. So, or listen to the podcast.
So you want to see the movie as a means to an end.
Exactly.
You so badly want to watch or listen to this recap that you'll see a whole movie in order to do so.
Yeah, it kind of describes my life.
I like that attitude, and you know what? I wish more listeners had that attitude. Come on, guys, get with the program.
So thanks for joining us. We hope to see you again soon on post-show recaps, and let us know your thoughts on social media. Thanks, everybody. Bye.